let's try a different sort of survey as we begin. Who here identifies that their day-to-day role is essentially that of an entrepreneur? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, quite a few. How many people here, while maybe not an entrepreneur, think of themselves as part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem and supporting it in some way? Actually, there were more than 100% of people who raised their hands, but that's okay, because maybe there's some overlap between these categories. But that essentially is the topic that we're going to be covering today, because there are many different ways to think about what an entrepreneurial community is. But generally, outside of maybe a few places, and maybe not even outside of any places, it's not just a group of entrepreneurs that happen to organically somehow evolve a community. I mean, in reality, there's oftentimes a very careful set of choices and support mechanisms that really enable and serve as a catalyst for those entrepreneurs. And that's really what we're talking about today. It's those kind of entrepreneurial communities, how to create them. Oftentimes you think of them as entrepreneurial ecosystems. And today we have two individuals that really run, I would say, the two most important efforts around creating an entrepreneurial community within Upstate. We have Marnie LaVigne, who is the president and CEO of Launch New York, Buffalo-based, but doing its work across Upstate. And of course, we have also Nasir Ali, who is the co-founder and CEO of Upstate Venture Connect. Actually, that kind of began, and you began in Syracuse, but more recently he's lived in Rochester. Can you each talk a little bit about your organization and what it does in terms of supporting entrepreneurs in Upstate?
Great, thank you, Alex. And this is really impressive for a beautiful summer day to see all of you here. So we will do our best to deliver some useful information to you and hopefully some inspiration at the same time. Just as a note of connection to Rochester, so I am a University of Rochester alum, undergrad and grad, and it was my grad experience that drove me down the entrepreneurial pathway. And when I turned down a job at the VA hospital in Buffalo and said, I gotta go do this startup thing, it's taking my lab work and my graduate experience and taking it out to the market where it will impact lives and the economy. That has been the encapsulation of what has driven me to even be here today. So Launch New York very much was developed early on in planning 2010 and launched in 2012 with services I'll describe in a minute. But we were created to help complete the three legs to the stool that you need for a high growth potential business. There are what we like to call Main Street businesses that are not intended to scale, and there are high growth potential businesses that are intended to scale and even have global impact. This is the world where we travel. They're both extremely important to our economy and to our daily lives, but we have chosen, because of our 501c3 IRS charter, that we are addressing economic development through entrepreneurship and innovation, transforming economies like Rochester right here, where a lot of my graduate time was spent at Eastman Kodak, and the reductions in force were happening during that entire time. I don't even want to give you the years, because you'll know, but to see that we could create a new economy. So what's the three legs to the stool that we need to create these high growth potential businesses? We have to have the idea and the innovation, and don't let anybody ever tell you there aren't good ideas here, because that's what we had heard. There aren't investable businesses, there aren't good ideas, the data or otherwise. However, the availability of the two other legs to the stool is where we struggled, and I was fortunate to actually reflect on it personally. I was part of the idea. I did not have the experience as an entrepreneur, and I sure as heck had no money as a graduate student. So what Launch New York does is we actually create a basis to help seed stage companies, even as early as what we call a napkin stage, where you just have the idea, to get that experience, those connections, the talent, and access to that first dollar. So those two pieces are what we work on every single day. So Launch New York does not charge for any of these services. We are, as I mentioned, a nonprofit organization known as a venture development organization. If you look up that phrase on Wikipedia, it describes our community right here, which is a community that has not had a strong history of venture-backed businesses. And so a venture development organization addresses those two legs to the stool. I wish I could tell you it was my idea. It wasn't. We will get into a little bit of the models elsewhere, and that's how Launch New York got going. So 2012, we got going offering free mentoring services. So today, right now, you could go to launchny.org and apply in a very brief interview, if you will, and we will be doing a client intake with you typically within 10 days to see, are you a high growth potential business? We also want you to be coachable, and you need to be in the 27 counties of the western half of New York State. That is currently our area. We are privately funded, for the most part, with some federal dollars, and more recently we became a clean tech incubator for the state's Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA. I will tell you that private sector portion has been really powerful. So for us, we are mentoring at any given time 250 to 300 companies across Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, and the southern tier. I have more than 24 entrepreneurs in residence. Some of our folks, Ed, you want to raise your hand? Are any of our other EIRs here? Okay, great. We've got, each of our locations has a number of folks that we match to you as an entrepreneur and provide you one-on-one mentoring at no charge to you. We also provide you access to an on-demand group of 2,000 subject matter experts for a deep dive. We will give you 10 to 15 hours of access to these individuals who might help you grow a board, might help you understand regulatory issues, market concerns, opportunities, et cetera. So that's the mentoring. One key to our business. The other key, Alex Killian, our investment associate, you want to raise your hand there? Alex takes in companies who are looking for our dollars who must have been mentored for at least 3 months by us. So we are truly meant to serve all of you out there who don't have the connections to the three legs to the stool, the talent, people who've been there, done that, and who are willing to give you risk capital. You all deserve a chance to be a high-growth entrepreneur if you want to be one. And we realize we don't necessarily have so many role models here as they do in Silicon Valley. So Launch New York really has been all about helping you go down that path, and we understand that some of you won't continue, but we want to give you that opportunity. We're very pleased that we actually have a very diverse pool of entrepreneurs. So in fact, we have about a third women-led businesses and about 22% minority-led businesses. 70% of the companies that we serve are in low-income areas. So we do specialize in what will really impact this community and impact every one of you who wants to go down this path. So leveling the playing field's what we're all about in terms of the mentorship, but guess what? You gotta work hard to come in and get that money. So when you come into us, it isn't simply for us to make a decision, but we're going to put you through a very rigorous process because we know other investors will insist on it. Our money, our first $50,000, is certainly not going to get these high-growth businesses, to the moon. We know you will need more money. This is equity capital, is an investment. It's not a loan. So this is very different than going to a bank. So our focus is getting you ready for that, bringing you in, having you prepare. Alex literally runs an investment committee call every week. So once we introduced our seed fund in 2016, we became the most active seed fund in New York State in under 2 years and one of the most active in the country.
Yeah, I think that's worth applause. Probably a good time to pass it along as well.
Thanks all. I will just tell you it's because of the awesome work that's going on in the community, and then we have a team who's ready to receive. So we just want you to part of this is to know this is a resource available. Launch New York's been a little under the radar, and tonight's our breakout night.
Thanks, Marnie. And thank you, Alex, and thank you, Richard, for having me here tonight. So, ditto. Everything that she said, that's part of, you have to have a core belief. And when my partner, Martin Babinek, and I started UVC in 2010, it was built around a set of beliefs that were very similar. Our experience, mine in the Washington, D.C. area, his in Silicon Valley, was that if you want to have a dynamic economy, you need to have a constant stream of high-growth businesses that are being launched. If you do not have that kind of economy, then you really have an economy that's dependent upon ebbs and flows and the decisions that are made far away by people who don't know you. And that's the challenge of building that ecosystem. And a big part of that ecosystem we realized was the natural connectivity that happens in these places we call startup hubs. So the connect in the name is very much about that. It is the understanding that if you want to start something new, because entrepreneurship is not about looking for patterns that were true 6 years ago, it's about trying to figure out what's going to happen 6 years from now, And the only way that you can do that is by having a lot of people that are sort of open to new ideas and open to guiding you and open to sharing and paying it forward in that regard. So there's a lot of things that people need to be successful, but a base layer we realized was that entrepreneur to entrepreneur connectivity, someplace where someone who's starting on a big idea for the first time can have people who have been there and done that, maybe in a different context, but who actually understand all the different mistakes that don't need to be repeated and are willing to put in the time and the energy to pay it forward, not necessarily out of personal gain or return. So Upstate Venture Connect is a not-for-profit that we formed in 2010. And the goal was to recognize that none of the upstate communities on their own could actually achieve that scale unless we started to link them together. Because the person that could really benefit from figuring out how to build a great game development company, their mentor is likely in Troy, New York, not necessarily in Rochester. The person that could figure out how to build the next nano solution might find the right mentor in Buffalo, and there wasn't that level of connectivity at the time. So what we started to do was to build out the, for lack of a better term, the sort of the digital infrastructure to start making visible the fact that if you thought nothing was happening, all you had to do was go to the calendar on our website, and you could see that there's 100 events happening across these communities every month. This was 5 years ago. Today, there are probably twice as many. If you wanted to figure out how to find somebody who got what you were doing because everybody else around you had a different expectation, we wanted to be the resource that could help connect you with those people. The other piece that we worked on very hard was to figure out how to take the model for building an angel fund in Syracuse and find other entrepreneurs across the Thruway and down towards the Hudson Valley who could then replicate that model for their communities. So this notion of having more shots on goal is really important, and that's a big part of what we're doing. We've been doing this for 10 years, and Marnie's on my board, and we've chatted about it quite a bit. The world today across Upstate is very different. And so where we're going is we're now able to put things together like the book, like our CEO survey, which is trying to showcase how different the requirements and expectations and needs are for this emerging growth sector of our community compared to all the stuff that you're still reading about in the newspapers or the policies that you might be hearing about. It is a different world that we and people like Alex and a lot of you out there live in. And our aim is to raise that awareness and build more connectivity. So it was Martin and I and just our cars with a lot of highway miles on them, and now we've got 16,000 people in the network and a lot of momentum that is happening across the region. So we're just trying to add more fuel to the fire.
So both of you mentioned some gaps that need to be filled, that your organizations are trying to fill. There's also something to be said about trying to build on the strengths and emphasizing those. What do each of you see as kind of the core strengths of Upstate and Rochester in particular that we should be emphasizing more, and maybe what are some of the programmatic or other activities that we should be doing to build on those?
There's so many paths to go down on this particular answer, but the one path that really has me and our organization very excited is the strength of the love for this region. So expats, people who grew up here, people who went to school here, love this region. They are paying attention to what's happening here. They're looking online. I have a sister who's in the Midwest who knows stories in Buffalo or Upstate before I do, is constantly sending them out. Capitalizing on the power of that network is something that is a strength that I do think some other regions have, but we have it in a huge way, I think, because not only have we had a great quality of life to grow up here, but our higher education network is incredible. The 27 counties we cover, there are 50 higher ed institutions. So it's a phenomenal group of talent that may not be here right now, but that expat group is, in fact, one that we're taking advantage of in a new financial program we're offering now. So any of you who see us on online, on LinkedIn, we are talking about a new investor network that's saying, hey, everyone keeps saying, we love what you're doing. We want to, quote, see your deals. We finally said, okay, other than my just emailing out to a bunch of people every day, let's create a way for the rest of the world to see upstate New York deals. So that is launching shortly. We're actually having 100 beta users. We've got 60 in play now. The power of that is not just money. More importantly, frankly, it is really the connections. It's that other leg to the stool, the talent, the expertise. One of the biggest issues we are facing, yes, getting the money to the table. But money does come when there is confidence in the team and the idea all being moved forward together. So what we find is many of our companies, we have now 40 companies in our portfolio for our seed fund, those companies pretty quickly need teammates. Finding teammates who culturally and functionally are ready to come into a startup in this region is a huge challenge. At the same time, you all know you've got loads of people who want to come back to Western New York, upstate, anywhere, but they know that they're going to have a fallback in case the first job they take doesn't work out. So once we've actually grown enough of a landscape that they can feel confident that if job one doesn't work out, that they could move to job two, I can start attracting more people back here. But right now, I would say that talent continues to be as big, if not bigger, challenge for us as the capital. So I think this expat investor network will hopefully start to yield across all of those needs.
So, big question. I think that the strength that we have is also in some ways a source of weakness, okay? A friend of mine said to me a few years ago, you know, upstate New York is the fountain of youth. You know, we have a model where you've got 50, if you look across the rest of upstate all the way down to the Westchester area, there's 100 universities and colleges, 500,000 students coming through. And lo and behold, the kinds of students that those people are producing are the people that made my Android phone. You know, Andy Rubin, or the person that started Airbnb, or the person that started Netflix, or, you know, Priceline, or you can go on and on and on. So we have, in effect, a business model in the region that has mastered the art of, you know, turning people into diamonds and then just sending them away. And when we started UBC, we actually, it was this realization that led us to talk to all the people in upstate who are from the region, but who were building these businesses in Boston or New York or Silicon Valley and others. And it was fascinating because every single one of them gave us a very simple answer. They just said, when I was in upstate, pick your city, I knew I wanted to start a business, but I didn't know anyone else who could help me, because everyone I knew had either worked for the same company their entire lives, sometimes for generations, right? Or they were an academic and they knew everything in the world about one subject, but nothing about how to build a business. And so fast forward to whatever the transformative event was, because there's always an event like my girlfriend moved to go to grad school in Boston, or a friend of mine invited me out to, you know, to the West Coast or whatever. But then the story became the same all over again. It was like, when I got here, I ran into so-and-so, and then it introduced me to so-and-so, and then we met so-and-so, and before I knew it, I was with my tribe. You know, the problem that we have in our region is that we're not we tend to stick with the same tribe for generations as opposed to understanding that the tribe should be mixing more and doing more stuff together. There should be a lot more happening between Syracuse and Rochester, between Rochester and Buffalo. You know, an hour and a half commute is not a big deal in any other part of the world. If we want to compete with the rest of the world, we can't keep using that as an excuse, right? So a lot has changed, but I think one of the areas in which we're still looking at this is that the business model for colleges and universities is not really aligned with that kind of integration and mixing and the mixing of disciplines that leads to a successful business. You know, if I'm the dean of a college, I'm not going to hire two people who have the same expertise, because guess what? They are going to compete for the same grants. It's a zero-sum world. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of these patterns that as an outsider you begin to look at, which I think are slowly beginning to change, but the only way that we will be able to change them is when we're able to pull those people out of their silos and get them into entities and organizations and communities and gatherings again and again and again. The noise level has to go higher is one of those things, you know? So I think that's a big part. We have the most important thing in the world, talent. You know, this is the gold of today. And what we make of it is up to us.
So one of the things that actually has been covered a little bit in the Rochester Beacon, and I mean, to some of us it seems like a pattern, is that there have been companies like Employee Channel and Live Tiles and Datto and Catalan Technologies that are in, I think, San Francisco, New York, Boston, and Connecticut, respectively. But each of them has decided to set up a significant portion of their operations here, largely focusing on technology and kind of hiring as many software engineers as they can out of the local universities, and also a lot of kind of the support, back office, I mean, all sorts of other things, and just sort of keeping their, you know, salespeople or whoever in some of these other places. And that does seem like a potential way also to engage maybe expats, because in a number of those cases, that's exactly how those companies ended up having facilities here. It wasn't that they kind of did this wide look. I mean, they knew Rochester and they decided to set things up here. Might that be kind of one way that we start to draw in individuals from other cities to start setting up shop here, trying to more incorporate individuals who are expats and basically widening the tribe that we all kind of otherwise tend to stick with?
Yes, I do think that is absolutely a strategy and ultimately a tactic we need to be thinking about. My other role has been in economic development, and I head up the New York State Economic Development Council. Economic development does tend to fragment us. And so when you think about working with startups or larger companies, again, it's I'm attracting a company to come here, I'm taking those employees, and you even see it within communities, just the same county, for example. So I think that we're getting to one of the factors that is a gap for us, which is an attitude of openness and collaboration and understanding that this kind of economy that we are growing faster and faster, it's like we're a locomotive going toward a global economy where you have to be open to working with others in other regions and realize it's not a zero-sum game. And you have to move away from that thinking. And so to be okay with the fact that we maybe have a startup company who ends up with employees going to another city, and then we too can attract those employees. I think that the economic development world, though, tends to be very job numbers focused and not thinking about ultimately the bigger picture. I'm very fortunate that our IRS charter for Launch New York is for job and wealth creation, because we understand a lot of these new economy companies will actually have fewer employees than our economic developers might like. So I do think that that is exactly the kind of mindset we have to take, but it is more of a global thinking, And what I would put toward the attitudinal side of our ecosystem, that definitely needs work. Briefly, Techstars, whom some of you may be familiar with out of Boulder, Colorado, is now considered one of the models for building an entrepreneurial accelerator and ecosystem. When they looked at our region and did an assessment, they said there's 3 factors. You have to have activities, actors, and attitudes. We've grown, so in our period of time, the activities are much better. It's amazing. You can come to these kinds of events frequently. Actors, we've talked about that. You need experienced people. We recognize that. We're working on that. Attitudes is a real issue where fear of failure tends to still rule the day in upstate New York. So if you fail, it's not considered a great lessons learned and you've got, laps on the track. It's more of a concern. So I would say that attitudes of openness, collaboration, being able to tolerate risk and ambiguity, these are things that we need in the community among all of you to bring to our companies. So whether you're going with an established company moving a new division here, or whether you're going into a startup, we have to be looking at the big picture. Last note on that is understand when I was in the academic world, I would often get a phone call, hey, we have this new faculty member. They have what they call a trailing spouse. Could you help them? Could you help them? Because I know we'll seal the deal and recruit this new faculty member if you can find a job. So every time we're talking about this kind of dynamic, people are still coming in dyads, right? And then a family. So we really need to think in a more comprehensive way.
So I think there's a real opportunity there. But I think that expecting the existing economic development world, as Marnie really clearly pointed out, to be able to do anything at the scale and with the speed that is required is probably misplaced expectations. I think that these are attitudinal issues, and as we have successful people in Upstate who are proud to share that message, others in their networks. Nobody can grow a successful business in a part of the world like ours without having 99% of their customers be elsewhere, right? And when you have that situation, what you have is the opportunity to share what you are proud of and what you see as the opportunity with those 99% of the people that are in your network. And you have a relationship of trust and expertise and understanding and so on. And so to me, the opportunity here is to figure out, take someone like Marconi and Employee Channel or Dan Diefendorf from Live Tiles, how do we get them to be the ambassadors, to talk about their experience? And in those 2 cases, I know you've had them on this program and they've done a great job, but this has to go in some ways through viral word of mouth, because it really has to be done in a manner where you're having the conversation from someone who is saying, trust me, I built my business here, and you have no idea about the caliber of talent that's available and the price that you can get them at, and the lifestyle that they can have at what you are paying them, and all of those things start to add up. So that can go from 1 to 10 to 100 much faster than us trying to figure out an economic development pathway for doing so. And all of our organizations and everything are very open to helping make those connections, because that's what we need. We need more expertise. So last comment on this is, when I moved to Upstate, I had lived in Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C., and I literally felt like Syracuse was a foreign country. And it took me a long time to figure out why it felt like such a foreign country. I mean, we drove on the same side of the road, everything was in English, we paid dollars, but it just felt very, very different from the America that I had lived in previously, right? And so there was a book that I read called Culture and Competition by Annalise Saxenian, who is a dean at the iSchool at Berkeley. And she had done an analysis of why Route 128 compared to Silicon Valley and the Japanese invasion, and how Route 128, which had digital and Wang and Data General, it was where computing was born. It was the Northeast was where the computing revolution was going to happen. We were the leaders in everything. And they all died, right? And all of a sudden, Silicon Valley took a dip, but then everything came back up. So I urge all of you, if you get a chance to actually find that book and read it, and you'll be fascinated, because every one of the companies that a lot of people here still sit around and mourn, had exactly the same cultural and social challenges that did in Data General, Wang, and Digital. And this happened 20 years before any of that affected us. The second book that she wrote was even more interesting because she looked at the effect of immigrant entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley and how they went back to places like Israel and Taiwan and India and rejuvenated the economies of those countries. So when you're talking about, and that was called the new Argonauts. So when you're talking about the opportunity that you're pointing out, that is really the opportunity, and the model exists out there. But it was really one that was driven by the entrepreneurs themselves, building those networks and leveraging those networks to rebuild their home countries.
So actually, I think at this point we're going to take some questions here in a minute, but maybe just a round of applause for our two guests.